Mike Mentzer, the 1970s Mr. Universe and the creator of the heavy-duty system of high-intensity training, is remembered as one of bodybuilding's most intellectual and philosophical figures. His contributions extended well beyond sets, reps, and rest periods. He sought to apply rational principles and scientific reasoning to every aspect of physique development, including nutrition. While many bodybuilders of his era embraced extreme eating habits, Mentzer's dietary philosophy was striking for its moderation, balance, and reliance on empirical evidence rather than bodybuilding dogma. This video explores Mentzer's approach to diet, as revealed in his own words, and exemplified by his eating patterns during competition preparation. By analyzing his typical daily menu, macronutrient breakdown, and rationale for food choices, we gain insight into how he aligned nutrition with his philosophy of efficiency, intensity, and reason. Energy first, food as fuel for training. Mentzer's approach began with the recognition that food primarily serves as energy. He rejected the idea that more food automatically meant more muscle. Instead, he argued that the body's first requirement is energy to fuel basic functions and physical exertion. High-intensity training, the cornerstone of heavy duty, was impossible without adequate caloric support. As he noted, quote, "Energy is the first thing our food is used for, so I always make sure to get enough calories to fuel my heavy-duty workouts. Without the proper fuel, high-intensity muscular contraction becomes an impossibility." Close quote. This insight stands in contrast to the common bodybuilding assumption that endless protein or massive calorie surpluses were necessary for growth. For Mentzer, quality and balance mattered more than blind excess. A typical day of eating. In a question and answer column, Mentzer provided a detailed description of his meals during contest preparation. His example offers a window into his dietary structure. Quote, "I start each day with a breakfast, about 2 hours before my workout, comprised almost entirely of carbohydrates, the body's preferred source of efficient fuel for just about all of its activities. This morning, for instance, I had 2 bran muffins with butter, a piece of 7-grain toast, 2 figs, along with 2 or 3 cups of coffee. Following my workout some 3 to 4 hours later, I had a small milk and egg protein drink, along with some fresh pineapple and grapes. For my midday lunch at about 3 o'clock, I had a baked potato and more fruit. Finally, at 8 o'clock in the evening, I had my final meal, which consisted of 2 chicken breasts, a salad, corn on the cob, and 2 scoops of ice cream." Close quote. Several key principles emerge from this schedule. 1. Carbohydrates dominated breakfast to fuel the upcoming workout. 2. Post-workout nutrition was modest, focused on replenishing with fruit sugars and a small protein drink. 3. Lunch remained light, consisting mainly of complex carbs and fruit. 4. Dinner was the largest and most balanced meal, providing protein, vegetables, and even dessert. What is striking is the moderation. Unlike many of his peers who consumed 6 to 8 meals per day, gallons of milk, or dozens of eggs, Mentzer structured his nutrition around just 4 feedings. None of them were extreme. Macronutrient breakdown. Mentzer qualified his intake in terms of calories and macronutrients. Quote, "Of the approximately 2,000 calories accounted for here, some 1,000 of them come from carbohydrates, 300 from protein, and the remaining 700 from fats. Half of my daily calorie allotment, therefore, comes from carbohydrates." Close quote. This macronutrient split, 50% carbs, 15% protein, 35% fat, was consistent with mainstream nutritional science of the time. In fact, he emphasized its alignment with broader health guidelines. Quote, "This is not too far off the percentage recommended, 60%, by the Senate Subcommittee on Nutrition, or the 65% recommendation of most reputable nutritional scientists and physical educators." Close quote. It's worth noting, however, that elsewhere Mentzer recommended a more standardized ratio of 60% carbohydrates, 25% protein, and 15% fat. His actual day-to-day eating sometimes looked different, as in the contest prep example above, where his fat intake was higher and protein lower. This suggests that Mentzer distinguished between general recommendations he felt would suit most athletes and his own personal practice, which varied with circumstances and preferences. Mentzer's reliance on carbohydrates challenges modern low-carb, high-protein bodybuilding dogma. He saw carbs as the most efficient fuel for muscular contraction, aligning with his training philosophy of short, brutally intense workouts. Protein intake was deliberately restrained, and fats, while variable, were not avoided. Protein, less than you think. One of Mentzer's boldest claims was that bodybuilders needed far less protein than commonly believed. In describing his own contest prep nutrition, he explained that he consumed about 70 grams of protein per day, a relatively modest amount for a 215-pound bodybuilder. Yet he insisted this was more than enough to maintain and even build muscle when paired with high-intensity training and proper rest. He contextualized this by citing nitrogen balance research. Quote, "The 70 or so grams of protein consumed is actually in excess of that needed for maintenance and growth. 25 grams a day is all that's needed to maintain a positive nitrogen-protein balance in the body." Close quote. This statement can easily be misread if divorced from context. When Mentzer mentioned 25 grams per day, he was referring to the scientific literature on sedentary men, not athletes. Nitrogen balance studies place the minimal requirement at about 23 to 24 grams per day for the average adult male. Mentzer rounded this up to 25 grams when making his point. His argument was rhetorical. If sedentary men can maintain themselves on roughly 25 grams per day, then surely the 300 to 400 grams promoted in bodybuilding magazines were wildly excessive. By contrast, Mentzer himself consistently consumed around 60 to 70 grams per day leading up to contests such as the 1979 Florida Pro Cup, and found that more than sufficient to support his muscle mass and competitive conditioning. In fact, in Muscle Builder Power magazine's coverage of that contest, Mentzer openly told editor Bill Reynolds, quote, "The primary way I reduced calories for this competition was to cut back drastically on my consumption of fats, no beef then, and reduce my protein intake to 60 grams per day. Undoubtedly, this sounds incredible to you, but your body does not need more than that amount to build huge muscles, since it's perfectly capable of manufacturing its own protein from other foods." Close quote. Reynolds recounted his surprise at watching Mentzer enjoy a bowl of ice cream during their interview. For Mike, this was no contradiction. Quote, "The body's preferred source of fuel for energy production is carbohydrate, so my carbohydrate level is high to keep my training energy and daily energy levels up. That's why I'm eating ice cream before the contest. In fact, I've had at least 3 scoops every day this week, and I'm still cutting up. As long as I keep my daily caloric intake under a certain level, I get progressively more defined." Close quote. Here, Mentzer's philosophy was on full display. Rather than bowing to bodybuilding dogma, he trusted physiology and logic. Protein was modest, carbohydrates were emphasized for fuel, and even foods viewed as forbidden could play a role if they fit the larger principle of balance and calorie control. His point was rhetorical and philosophical as much as nutritional. If sedentary men could survive on 25 grams a day, and if he could thrive on 60 grams a day as a professional bodybuilder, then the bodybuilding orthodoxy of 300 to 400 grams per day was absurd. As he argued, such inflated recommendations were often driven less by science and more by the interests of supplement companies. Quote, "Anyone suggesting that exceptionally large quantities of protein are a requirement for added muscle growth probably has an interest in a protein company." Close quote. By putting the numbers in context, Mentzer demonstrated his broader principle. Growth comes from training stimulus and recovery, not protein excess. His 60 to 70 grams a day was enough, and the 25-gram research baseline served as a reminder of how exaggerated protein myths had become. The role of fats and treats. Mentzer's diet was not devoid of indulgence. He freely admitted to including butter, chicken, fat, and ice cream. Quote, "The 700 calories of fat comes from the butter, chicken fat, and ice cream. And this is more apt to vary in my diet as I rarely use butter. Although I average ice cream 3 days a week even before a contest." Close quote. This flexibility reflected his belief that psychological sustainability mattered. An overly restrictive, joyless diet was neither necessary nor desirable. By including occasional desserts, he demonstrated that success in bodybuilding did not require ascetic extremes. For Mentzer, balance was the essence of good nutrition. Quote, "My diet is close to being well-balanced, which is the most important nutritional factor whether you're an athlete or not." Close quote. This emphasis on balance placed him closer to mainstream dietetics than to fringe bodybuilding practices. He insisted that growth came not from overfeeding, but from training stimulus and recovery. Quote, "Eating excess calories will not make muscles grow any faster. Recent research has shown that muscles will grow for short periods on a starvation diet if one thing is present: high-intensity muscular contraction." Close quote.
Nutrition is actually fairly simple, and I promise you I am not attempting or seeking to oversimplify it even slightly when I say that all you've really got to be concerned with here is in getting a well-balanced diet daily. Just like you learned back in high school health class, and they weren't joking. Follow my reasoning here. A well-balanced diet, by definition, by valid definition, is one that provides your body with all the nutrients that it needs. Now, the important follow-up statement is the human body does not utilize nutrients beyond need.
This reinforces his belief that bodybuilding progress comes primarily from training stimulus, with diet serving only as the supportive secondary factor once growth has been triggered. Context: bodybuilding in the 1970s. To fully appreciate Mentzer's ideas, it is important to contrast them with the prevailing practices of his era. Many bodybuilders pursued protein-heavy diets, often exceeding 300 to 400 grams daily. Extreme practices like the meat and water diet or low-carb depletion were common before contests. In this environment, Mentzer's moderate, scientifically grounded approach was unusual. He aligned more with emerging sports science than with bodybuilding folklore. His macronutrient ratios mirrored governmental and academic recommendations. His skepticism of protein supplements foreshadowed later critiques of the supplement industry. And his insistence on balance over excess anticipated modern evidence-based fitness culture. Mentzer's nutritional views cannot be separated from his broader intellectual outlook. A student of objectivist philosophy, he valued reason, evidence, and efficiency. Just as he rejected marathon workouts in favor of short, high-intensity training, he rejected gluttonous eating in favor of rational moderation. In training, he sought maximum intensity in the least amount of time. In diet, he sought moderation and balance without excess. In both, the guiding principle was efficiency, achieving the greatest return without wasted effort. His diet was not about asceticism, but about avoiding waste. Every calorie, like every rep, should have a purpose. Lessons for modern athletes. Today, Mentzer's nutrition philosophy remains relevant. 1. Fuel training. Don't chase excess. Energy needs come first. Without sufficient calories, performance suffers. 2. Carbs are crucial for intensity. Despite low-carb trends, high-intensity performance thrives on carbohydrate fuel. 3. Protein myths persist. Evidence continues to show diminishing returns beyond moderate protein intakes. 4. Balance beats extremes. Long-term sustainability matters more than short-term gimmicks. 5. Enjoy food. Including treats like ice cream demonstrates that psychological flexibility aids adherence. For bodybuilders and athletes, Mentzer's approach offers a reminder: progress is not about consuming more, but about consuming wisely. Mike Mentzer's heavy-duty nutrition mirrored his training philosophy, rational, efficient, and grounded in evidence rather than myth. His typical daily meals reflected balance, moderation, and practicality. By emphasizing energy, carbohydrate fuel, modest protein, and dietary flexibility, he challenged the extreme nutritional dogmas of his peers. Ultimately, Mentzer's legacy in nutrition is the same as in training, a call to think critically, reject superstition, and pursue bodybuilding with reason and efficiency. His words remain a refreshing antidote to the excesses of fitness culture. As he reminded his audiences more directly,
if an individual is overnourished or even adequately well-nourished and he's not making bodybuilding progress, then do you see that his problem ain't nutrition? Training is the first requirement. Nutrition is only a secondary consideration. It is only within the context of first having stimulated growth through proper high-intensity training that nutrition then becomes a factor, and then it's quite simple once again. All you've got to do is get a well-balanced diet, which can be obtained by consuming a certain number of portions each day from the 4 basic food groups.
This final reminder tied his nutrition philosophy directly back to heavy-duty training. Fuel the body sensibly, but never mistake diet for the primary driver of muscle growth.